It's 9:30 on a Monday morning. Are you ready to pass the Unit 4 test? Hey everybody, it's Mr. Shaw. Hope you're all doing well and you're ready to take the Unit 4 test on the Baroque and Classical periods today. Now I just wanted to make a short video to give you some keys about what to think about while taking this test. When we started, we looked at 4.1, the Baroque period. And in that we discovered that the Baroque period came after the Renaissance. It lasted from 1600 to 1750. And it's defined by a lavish and extravagant lifestyle that the upper reaches of European society enjoyed. That's what Baroque means. It's this decadent idea. You know, the music is over the top, overdone, extravagant. You know, we're defined by these long and continuous melodies. Even though we use homophonic and polyphonic texture, it still reflects this kind of, you know, lots and lots of texture, and it's very thick kind of music. All right, and we also have these ideas of the virtuoso musician, the musician that is incredibly talented, playing incredibly difficult pieces that are written just for them at the time. So we looked at some of these virtuosic pieces when we listened to Vivaldi's concerto called The Four Seasons. And we listened to specifically the first movement of the Spring Concerto. Dun 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 da 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 da, etc., etc. All right, that's an example of a virtuosic piece. It's a concerto. It's a piece meant for soloists and orchestra. We move on to 5.2. And in 5.2, it's all about opera, which I told you was one of my favorite musical genres. And the main thing you want to know about opera is that we have a split between two types of pieces. We have the recitative, which is pushing along the scene. You know, the action is in the recitative. It's very sparse accompaniment, and it's very simple singing. The melodies aren't very difficult. They're pretty predictable. And they flow with the conversation that's happening at the time, and it moves along the action, like I said earlier. We also have the aria. The aria is where we express one emotion for a longer period of time. With the history of opera, we're going to get into this a lot more in the final unit. You're going to get to hear a lot more about the opera that advances. But it starts off, it's a very odd way that the opera begins. All right, there is something called the intermezzi, and then we also have medieval plays from the medieval period. But really, stage work using music is a new idea, and it's formed because of this group called the Florentine Camerata, which decide that let's sit around, we're all smart people, and figure out something. So they figure out that, hey, we should form this thing called opera. And, you know, to their surprise, it's a success, and then we talked about how it traveled through Italy, through Florence, to Rome, to Venice, and then down to Naples, where it kind of meshed all the other three styles together. You know, where we said originally they just sang, but they didn't really act too well. And then they get to Rome and they decide, oh, I can learn to act. And then Venice says, hey, well, we have lots of money. We're the Venetian Republic. We can, you know, make lots of money and make big, elaborate sets. So they have that. And then Naples brings it all together. Okay, so that's, you know, a couple thoughts there on that. What happens is we come up with these two different types of opera. All right, we come up with comedies and serious dramas, where we call them opera buffas, you know, buffoons, and opera seria, serious. Okay, and those are the two styles that are going to fight each other in the 1600s and the 1700s into the 1800s. And when we get to the 1800s, the Romantic period being this, you know, it's another over the top. It's not Baroque per se. You'll be able to hear it. It's a lot stronger with its orchestration and its chromaticism, and it's changing keys all the time. It has a strong feeling of that, and it's reflecting a lot of different themes. It's where program music really starts to come into play. Whereas in Baroque and Classical, we're more absolute. Even though Four Seasons obviously is about the seasons changing and everything. In the Romantic period, the music, the rhythm, everything reflects what is happening. Okay, it's a complete emotional experience, and we'll talk about why we're going into that emotional experience in just a second. All right, but in the Romantic period, we start forming these grand operas, and they're kind of like the Venetian operas, but on a much larger scale. I mean, these are 3.5, 4-hour operas, You know, it's a hard one to get through to begin with. But the Grand Opera, big sets, lots of crazy, you know, just amazing melodies, big orchestras, everything's big. Let's put it that way. Everything's big. The best example that we have of that is the opera Aida. Now, you might know this as an Elton John, Tim Rice ripoff musical. Good musical, but the opera is much better, all right? You know, did Tim Rice and Elton John get to have their first performance with the backdrop of the Giza pyramids? I don't think so. So that's pretty amazing. 1871, Giuseppe Verdi, the guy that wrote the opera, he gets to premiere it in Cairo with the Giza pyramids in the background. I mean, how much better can you get than that? Giza pyramids, I think there's nothing better. Later on, we have a guy named Richard Wagner. We'll talk about him later. He discusses the idea of the music drama, where he calls it the Gesamtkunstwerk. All right, which is just total artwork, is what it means. But another big idea, you know, where it's still kind of moving off the grand opera scheme, but it's a complete music drama, is what he wanted to get at. Finally, he also used the idea of leitmotif, it's the idea of having a theme. You know, like, for example, he influences this guy named John Williams, all right? And John Williams, as you know, wrote music for Jaws, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Schindler's List, Jurassic Park. The list goes on. And his influence from Wagner is the fact that he could combine and organize themes like he did with his leitmotifs in his operas. Jumping back in time, 1750 to 1820 with the classical period. This is 4.3. It's dominated by the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is an intellectual period in the 1700s in which, you know, our government is influenced. Many of the European governments, when monarchies fall, their influence. It's the idea of the people rising, the realist kind of idea, you know, the people rule, that kind of thing. And it's reflected in music, because now we're having, instead of this, you know, grandiose idea in the Baroque period, this absolute, you know, we have to be over the top, overdone, reflect the wealthy. Now we're reflecting the common person, okay? This is the rise in amateur musicianship. This is the rise in, you know, the idea of having shorter melodies, still tough pieces. I mean, you can still have virtuosic people playing classical music. It doesn't mean that, oh, this is for the bums that don't play music. No, it's for everybody, okay? But the idea of, you know, teaching people, rising, having everybody learn to have a craft, learn to play an instrument, that kind of thing. That's big in the classical period. All right, and it's a KISS method. It's keep it simple. Well, you know, the melody. It's shorter. You know, it might be like two phrases. You know, the da 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 da. Exactly, and then you repeat that da 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 da. You know, harmony. We're settling on two chords, a tonic and dominant. Remember I told you, dominant, it feels like you're going home. Tonic is home. So, jump, bum, that kind of idea. And then we also talked about, you know, I just sang that da 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 da, surprise symphony, theme and variation, right? Where we start changing the theme, making it different. And there's several ways that we can do that. We can change the rhythm. We can add more notes. We can change the meter. We can change the tonality. We can make it minor instead of major. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do. All right, so finally, let's talk about some composers. And I'm going to talk about four, just because they're important. Even though we only talked about three in this section, there's a fourth one that we talked a lot about that I feel is worth mentioning. Okay, so in order. J.S. Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. All right, he is born in 1685, dies in 1750. He is the prime example of Baroque composition. Yeah, that's good. Way to lose your lines, right? He is the prime example of Baroque composition. And the reason why is his ideas on theory set the standard for the next, well, ever since 1750 when he died. And obviously that's reflective. His death is the end of the Baroque period. What's important about Bach? Well, he is a master of living in the patronage system. He works as an organist in Arnstadt, Mulholland, and Weimar. He is a royal music director in Cothen, and then also becomes the town music director in Leipzig. You know, he lives in the patronage system, whereas his successors don't necessarily do that. Now, Franz Joseph Haydn, he lives from 1732 to 1809. He is the last great composer of the patronage system. And he is working for a guy named Esterházy, Prince Esterhazy. He's a German prince. And in his tenure at the Esterhazy estate, he writes so much music. But remember, when we talk about patronage, who are you writing for? You're not writing for yourself. You are writing for the person that employs you. For example, Haydn wrote a ton of pieces for baritone. Not baritone like the baritone horn, but baritone, B-A-R-Y-T-O-N, which is a type of string instrument that was popular during the classical period. It's the same range as a cello. So if you're a cello player, you got 10,000 Haydn pieces to play that are actually for baritone. All good though, right? So he's the last great example of the patronage system. Then we have Mozart. Mozart starts breaking the threshold that once was. Okay, so he starts breaking the idea of being a patron. He's offered many employments from people who are willing to be his patron, and he says no. He just wanted to take different. He just wanted to take commissions, here and there. And that's how he supported himself, and he also played a ton. I mean, the guy was making money, with touring and all that stuff. He's a child prodigy. He didn't live very long. He lived from 1756 to 1791. I mean, the guy was in his early 30s and then croaks, And we said that's probably because of a plague, got him because he was such a workaholic, overworked himself, and then, that's what happens, sometimes. So he was a here and there guy. He still wrote over 600 pieces, performed lots of them. His operas were popular, became even more popular after his death, and just a class example of how the patronage system started to decline. Finally, we have Ludwig van Beethoven, one of my favorites, 1770 to 1827. He's at the latter end of the classical period, and he kind of brings in the Romantic period just by his own doing. He is completely against patronage. Okay, he does not want to work for a royal person. If you've ever seen the movie Beethoven Lives Upstairs, there's a great example where a royal soldier comes up, one of the royal guard comes up with a message for Beethoven from the Emperor of Austria. He's living in Vienna at the time, and this little boy who's renting his mother's renting space to Beethoven, he ends up going up, and Beethoven's like, "Tell him no," and the boy's like, "You're nuts," kind of thing, just like, what are you doing, and he says, there are many royalty. There's much royalty, but there was only one Beethoven, or something like that. It's really pompous about it. So he hates patronage, right? He only took his own commissions, commissions, performance. Remember, though, Beethoven does become deaf in his lifetime, right around the early 1800s. So around 1800, he's starting to feel some tinginess in his ears, some ringing, and over time it leads to a complete deafness, but he continues to write. His drive, his passion, his emotion is in the composition, and that's what he's looking at. So his use of emotion, and the examples that we have are such as the Pathetique Sonata, Symphony No. 5, the Fear Symphony, Symphony No. 9, the Choral Symphony, and they reflect his journey from being in complete despair, complete anxiety over what was happening to him, to realizing he can beat this, he can be a deaf composer, and he will rise and he will succeed. That's what he's going for. If you have any other questions, if there's something that I did not answer, remember I'm just trying to give you some ideas, some things to kind of jog your memory about this Unit 4 test. Please contact me. Feel free. You have the Yahoo IM, you have the work phone number, and you have the K-mail. Alright, so use your sources wisely. Do well on your test. I know you all can do well. Have a great day. I hope you get your test done and you can enjoy this weather. Apparently it's going to be in the 70s all week. So enjoy yourselves. Have a great day. Take it easy. Mr. S out.